Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, co-host of this wonderful podcast series. I'm a longtime journalist, and the reason we are gathered here is to hear from my dear friend David Parker, who is a great author. He is based, of course, in San Francisco, and the title of his newest book is A San Francisco Conservative. Hey, David, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing very well, very well.
Good.
It's a beautiful day here in Connecticut. I am not actually nestled under the bridge behind me, although I wish I was. I love San Francisco. So
no, to me, you are.
So I'd love to just jump right in. You know, our conversations I always find so stimulating and very timely. And as I often say, you know, in my many years working as a journalist, I was talking a minute ago before we started rolling about time I spent with Charles Kuralt at CBS News and, you know, Good Morning America and CNN and so on. Often, you know, we're reporting the news of the day, which I love how you reminded me, well, that's what journalists are supposed to do, report the news of the day. But I somehow along the way missed the historical context that gives current events so much more meaning, you know, and I love that that's in both of your books, Income and Wealth and A San Francisco Conservative. And you suggested a great topic to focus on. And if we were to sum it up in one word, I think of power. And if it was two words, you know, corporate power. But why don't we just jump right into that? And what should we be aware of that maybe a lot of people are not aware of right now?
Well, you mentioned that I give a historical perspective. That's one of the things that motivates me to write. I can't believe how stuff that Aristotle or Cicero or the founding fathers were talking about are exactly what we're talking about, in the same language, the same approach to it. And we were talking just before coming on about what's called the corporate state. If you have a government that gets too big, I think American government is too big, it can lead to the corporate state. When Brer Fox caught Brer Rabbit said to Brer Fox, "Oh, please, 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 don't throw me in the briar patch." He says, and Brer Fox says, "Aha, I'm gonna throw you in the briar patch." And that's exactly what Brer Rabbit wanted. So the corporations, they are Brer Rabbit. They're telling Brer Fox, government, please, 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 don't regulate us. You know, Sarbanes-Oxley and Dodd-Frank is so expensive. You're going to put us out of business. And the railroads did the same in 1870. Oh, please don't regulate us. And that's what they wanted, because they could set the rates so high that they could never get those rates otherwise. That was the trade-off with government. Okay, you can regulate us, but here are the rates. And it was a bad deal. So the corporations say, oh, don't regulate us. But in fact, they can afford the regulation because their long-run average costs, or you could say economies of scale, so surpass the smaller corporations or smaller firms. It's really millions of dollars a year in attorneys and accounting to comply with Dodd-Frank or Sarbanes-Oxley, and they can afford it. And so what happens is the smaller companies start to fold and the bigger companies grab them. They gobble them up.
Also, I can't know that it's fascinating, and I can definitely see that it does work that way. Many of us don't think about it very often, but also, again, I got my start in television news in Washington covering politics, and you run into something there in Washington called a lobbyist. And so, as you know, David, I get my news from a lot of liberal sources like CNN and whatnot. And so they're often saying, well, hey, did you know the way that the draft legislation for certain environmental policies or certain, oil and gas drilling policies, and whatever, many different kinds of companies are often written by, former executives from those companies who make a lot of money as lobbyists. I mean, that's also the way Washington works.
Right. Public utility commissions, like in California, PG&E is a public utility. So there's a board supervising them on behalf of the citizens. But the big public utility companies, not just gas and electric, any public utility company anywhere in the country, they capture that board. They say, treat us right. And when your term is up, we'll give you a slot in our company at $500,000, I mean, $500,000 a year salary. Just treat us right when you're a member. And they do. They capture those boards. And when you have only a few corporations, you have a corporate state running everything. And for them to lobby is nothing. And yeah, they write the legislation. It doesn't cost them anything to lobby. Millions, hundreds of millions of dollars is nothing, because what they're getting is billions of dollars in exchange. But when you have a corporate state, in the historical perspective is Bismarck, 1870, he says, I'll let 6 corporations run the whole country, or 10 corporations. Siemens in Germany, for example, might have almost everything. And in exchange, you're going to raise your prices really high, which you can do because you have no competition. This is a corporate state now. 10 corporations are running the country, and you're going to raise the price so high and give us that difference, us, the government, that in your high price, and we're going to, as taxation, and we're going to give that to all the citizens. We're going to provide everything that citizens want and need: healthcare and pension, education, college education, cultural access to fine concerts, fine restaurants, everything that the citizens want. And what are the citizens going to give? One thing: they're going to give up their political freedom. They're going to let me, Bismarck, the ruler of Germany at the moment, a unified Germany, I'm in office for life. And citizens, especially Germans who are used to following orders anyway, fine. And that's the corporate state. And that's the model that's used by all the great dictators, except communist dictators, everybody else in the world. Someone like Hitler or someone like Mussolini in the 30s came to power. They didn't walk in with a revolution. They were appointed. They kind of snuck in through the corporate state. The 6 corporations running the country let them be in power, and then citizens let them stay in power. And there it is. And it's socialism in a way, giving citizens everything. That's socialism. In Germany, Hitler came to power through the National Socialist Party. That was his party. And the abbreviation for National Socialist is Nazi.
Well, certainly concerning. Do you see that? I mean, I can predict the answer, but do you see that happening in America right now? I mean, with the oil companies and airlines and oil and gas and so on.
I'm not worried about America. We're not that, but okay. Russia is, and Turkey is, and that's how it's exactly how Z in China operates. Alibaba, you can do this, but I'll give you a monopoly here. China is really controlling their country via a few corporations. That's how it's done. That's how it's done. That's historical perspective. And we should be careful about regulating business, is my message. Don't regulate business. The market will do it better than government will do it.
Yeah, we still have plenty of time to talk today, of course, but I just want to remind people, if they're joining us now, this is the podcast series, A San Francisco Conservative, with David Parker, author of the book, A San Francisco Conservative, which I definitely encourage you to check out, as well as his book, Income and Wealth. And David, I know a couple of the things you write about in your books, which seem to certainly not to contradict what you said, because it's certainly true and interesting to think about, but I'd love to hear your thoughts of how does anyone come up? Where does innovation come from? You've written about the entrepreneurial mind. You've written about what Alexis de Tocqueville said about the sense of personal responsibility. Like, I see great opportunities here. You've written about immigrants coming to America because they see opportunity. And so what you've just told us, and I know you said you're not talking about America, you're talking about China and so on, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on, the importance of that entrepreneurial spirit,
Well, you mentioned immigrants. Immigrants, in a way, are our savior. They're coming here. They're not asking for welfare or for a handout. They were living in countries that did that. They had elite governments and corrupt governments and undemocratic. So they don't want to hear about regulation of their life. They came here for their own prosperity and very often for their own children's prosperity, give them a chance to succeed in life. They want a competitive environment, and they do. Immigrants generally do well. And Silicon Valley was screaming at Trump when he was restraining immigration, because we need those top workers. U.S. has been draining the top minds for the last 200 years from around the world, and the world is almost mad at us. In Africa, someone becomes a doctor, and lo and behold, he's working he's in Cambridge. Come back to Africa. All the countries in the world, come back.
I don't know if it might, I apologize for interrupting, but it might not be as great an example as Russia or China, but I have a friend who has spent a lot of time in Haiti, an American couple from Georgia, the American Georgia. And so they've been helping orphans down there. And they say that, they want to get visas for some of these children. Their parents were, literally buried under an earthquake. So why can't they come to America? And the, Haiti, as you've noted before, I know is quite a, shall we say, a screwed up country politically and that kind of thing. But they say, we don't really want to give these children visas because once they see how wonderful America is, I don't know that they're going to come back, to this really tough island.
I've noticed that sometimes people need to leave their country and come here, and they open up. They change. You would think Haiti, which is probably the most undeveloped country in Latin America, when they come here, you don't hear of them. I know Haitians, and everyone I know I've met owns a restaurant or owns a business. They just like transform. People in India can't get a start, but when they come here, they blossom. And that's true for almost all immigrants.
Yeah, that's a great thing to see. Great thing to see. I remember I spent a number of months in China working for NBC's Today Show. They based in Beijing. This was before the Tiananmen Square massacre, which showed us how brutal the Chinese can be. But I was very interested when I came back home, to Washington, D.C. I was really interested in the mom and pop supermarket. These people work so hard. And I have a lot of American friends like, I don't really want to work that hard. It's very admirable,
I guess I can give a little anecdote story. In my neighborhood in San Francisco, there's a corner store. It doesn't stand out whatsoever. And I don't know who owns it. It may be, they're often Arab-owned grocery stores, but not so. I've never been in this little store, but I know that someone told me that when Gorbachev came to San Francisco, just before the fall of Russia, and he was looking around and realizing that things weren't so good in Russia, they're better here. He said that, and his wife had a cold, and she wanted a Kleenex. They stopped the car in front of that little store, and she went and got a Kleenex, and she came back up. She says, I have never been in a little store like that in my country where the owners they didn't know who I was, were so nice to me. Anything else we can get for you, and have a nice day. Isn't it lovely? Just nobody ever talks like that in Russia in a little store. So I was moved by that story. And so,
no, it's real, our fellow human beings working hard.
Yes.
And I have a friend from Russia, and tells me how hard it, she's in Connecticut actually now, but tells me how hard it is for her family back in Moscow, and just that brutal, iron rule there. But I'd love to move on to another topic actually, but related to what you're talking about here. And again, in your books, Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative, you've written about trade and how, as America, how do we compete against a nation like China that is going to subsidize and give immense power to, you know, huge companies like Alibaba?
Well, that's a lecture in itself. There's what makes economics so difficult is that there's only 3 or 4 principles. I could do a podcast on what the 4 principles of economics are, and one of them is called comparative advantage. China has a comparative advantage in producing low-cost products because the price of labor in China is much less than the price of labor here. So for a Chinese person to not work in a factory because he had a better opportunity to work in Silicon Valley or their Silicon Valley, they don't have that choice or that much of a choice. So it costs them $4 or $5. But for an American worker to work at $4 or $5, he won't do it because he'll work in Silicon Valley. Or America should do what it does best, which is high tech and creative new industry. And there's always employment in a dynamic economy like America, or any free market economy has an Achilles heel, a labor shortage. China has a labor shortage to this day. They're kicking themselves for their one-child policy. Their price of labor is going up and up and up, especially middle management. Eventually it'll trickle on down. They'll be like South Korea and Japan. They won't be able to undersell us anymore. That's their future. That's their Achilles heel of their future. So we have they have a comparative advantage in producing low-cost stuff. It doesn't cost them much to trade from working in a factory or working in a textile mill, because their employees don't have a choice of working in a Silicon Valley environment or working in high tech or having very creative enterprises. They do a little bit more now than they had in the past. So they don't have that choice, but we have that choice. And so Americans just have to walk off those low manufacturing jobs because we have better stuff. They have an advantage in doing that. They have a comparative advantage in producing low income stuff. So we shouldn't think about it. They're giving us, it's a gift. It's a gift to America to be able to buy a $40,000 car for $30,000 or $25,000. And we think of it as a loss of job instead of thinking of it as a gift. That's the mistake we're making.
We're almost out of time. I just have one quick question. What do you make of companies, American companies, I guess we'll call them American companies, but giants like Apple and Amazon, who, their CEOs talk about, how wonderful democracy is and so on. But again, I know that a lot of, our iPhones and iMac computers are assembled there in China for lower paid wages. I mean, maybe that, again, maybe that's the comparative advantage you're talking about.
Yeah, they can do it for so much less. It's not, it's a waste of American time. The American can be doing stuff that requires higher wages. If wages are very high, believe me, the job skills are going to be high because nobody pays stupidly. No one's going to pay for a high wage for a dumb job. So Americans have to come up to it. That's their problem. And if anybody is not working in this country, is because they have completely no education or no drive, or we have a labor shortage. So problem solved. It's not a problem.
Yes, there's those free market forces. Interesting. Good. Well, I think
it's nature.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
Free market is nature. We speak freely, and we have the right to vote, political freedom, and the economy should be free. Aristotle said it. Many people have said it throughout history. That's the best. And best doesn't mean that there's no problems. We have some inequality, but relative inequality. The rich are way richer than the poor, but the poor are way richer than the rest of the world. We have relative poverty. We don't have absolute poverty. People aren't dying at home from starvation. And there are plenty of places in the world. That's absolute poverty.
Yeah, no, it's good. Good point. Good point. Well, there's so much more to talk about. I think we're out of time for this episode, but I want to thank you, David, and also just remind our viewers and listeners to be sure to purchase copies of Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. So much stimulation and food for thought about topics exactly like we've been discussing here. We've only really scratched the surface of what you'll learn in those books. And so
don't get me started.
Purchase them. What's that? I'm sorry.
Don't get me started.
There's many more episodes to come.
Many more episodes.
That's right, and we want to include feedback and other views of what we're talking about here. So we will be looking for that, of course, to include in our conversation. And you can purchase those 2 books by visiting David's website, davidparkeressays.com, or by going to Amazon, speaking of Amazon. So thanks, David. I will catch you again soon.
Okay, thank you.